Hello. Today I'm going to talk about some basic mixing techniques for 360 audio. Primarily, I'm going to be discussing equalization, known as EQ, reverb, envelopes, and automation. I'm just going to open up the test project that I started in the last tutorial and get started. Once I get past the opening pop-up. Alright, so this is a shortened version of the audio file that we had last time, the news report. You'll notice that I've shifted it over a little bit because I want to start at a certain point in the video. And I have muted the headlock stereo track where we have the news music because it won't be as relevant for the video today. So, starting with EQ, we'll open the effects box. You'll notice that I have already added a few effects. For now, I will just copy those over to the muted track so that I have their values saved. I'll remove these and show you how to add them in. Fairly simple. So, when you want to add an effect to a track, you click on this box here. The first one that we'll be adding is going to be Re-EQ. Now, when you add an effects to a track that has the spatializer on it, you always want to make sure that the effects that you add go above the spatializer. That means that they'll be applied before the spatializer, and the spatializer is meant to be the last effect applied to any track. So, let's talk about equalizers a little bit. All sound that you hear is divided into frequency bands, and this allows you to edit the volume of those different bands. If I were to lower this, I would start lowering the volume of all frequencies that fell into 500 through 50 hertz. And if I were to lower this, I would start lowering the volume of frequencies around 1K hertz and moving in either direction. So, why is this useful for VR? Because sounds that come at you from a distance tend to lose their higher frequencies. They just tend to get absorbed by the environment first. So, you can use this fourth band, because it's a high shelf by default, to simulate an object being further and further away from the listener by dampening its higher frequencies more and more. So let's show this in action. If everything is still in order, then we should still be looking at the sun with this video. Not quite. There we are. So we're looking at the sun, and let's adjust the distance to be about 2 meters as it was before. And we will start from around this point in the video where I have the sound beginning, and let's watch for a moment. It will loop through.
Last night, the second tornado in 8 days hit Ontario. The first was in Windsor a week ago yesterday. Last night, another one whirled across the international boundary and struck Fort Francis.
The sound is currently very close
Jack
by.
McLaren of CKFI interviews a man who dodged a rowboat and a building
If I
in
were
the
to
storm.
increase the distance, it would get quieter.
Last night, the second tornado in 8 days.
So now it will sound a little bit further
The
away.
first was in Windsor a week ago yesterday. Last night, another one whirled across the
But
international
that's not the only thing
boundary
that
and
happens
struck
when a
Fort
sound
Francis.
is further away, as I
Jack
discussed.
McLaren
It
of
loses some of its
CKFI
higher
interviews
frequencies.
a man who
So
dodged a rowboat and a building in the
let's
storm.
take our gain
Last
down to
night,
minus
the second
infinite
tornado in 8 days hit Ontario.
and start lowering
The first
this.
was in Windsor a week ago yesterday. Last night, another one whirled across the international boundary and struck Fort Francis. Jack McLaren of CKFI interviews a man who dodged a rowboat and a building in the
So,
storm.
as you can hear, as I lower this, the
Last
sound gets
night,
more
the
muffled
second tornado in 8 days hit Ontario.
and begins to seem as though it's
The first
further
was
away.
in Windsor a week ago yesterday. Last night,
Perhaps
another
as if
one
there's
whirled
something
across
between
the
us
international
and the
boundary
wall
and struck
and
Fort
the
Francis.
sound.
Jack McLaren of CKFI
And now it
interviews
gets a little
man
closer.
who dodged a rowboat and a building in the storm. Last night, the second tornado in 8 days hit Ontario. The first
Further
was
away.
in Windsor a week ago yesterday. Last night, another one whirled across the international boundary and struck Fort Francis.
Through a combination of this effect and distance, you should be able to simulate an object being most any distance away from the listener.
The first was in Windsor a week ago yesterday.
And for now, I'm just going to take the value that I established before and copy it back over.
Last night, the second tornado in 8 days hit Ontario. The first was in
There we go.
Windsor a week ago yesterday. Last night, another
that's not
one
what I wanted.
whirled across the international boundary and struck Fort
So
Francis.
that's EQ in
Jack
a nutshell.
McLaren of
Fairly
CKFI
simple.
interviews a man who
So now we
dodged a
talk
rowboat
about
and a
reverb.
building in the storm.
Let's stop this for a
Last-
moment. Reverb is, as it sounds, it simulates the reverberations of a sound in an environment. Now, the quality of the native reverb generator in Reaper is not very high, but it's sufficient to get a decent result out of the plugin. So you'll see that I just clicked Add and put in a reverb generator. Now, there are only 4 parameters that you need to worry about when using the reverb generator. 4 or 5, perhaps. Length almost doesn't count. But room size will simulate more and more reverb. In fact, let's just keep this playing as we do this so you can hear.
Last night, the second tornado in 8 days hit Ontario. The first was in Windsor.
So you can hear with a large room size,
Last night, another one whirled across
there's a
the
very, very
international
prominent
boundary
echo
and
effect.
struck Fort Francis. Jack McLaren of CKFI
Now, at the moment,
interviews a man who
the
dodged
reverb
a
is so
rowboat and a
prominent
building in the storm.
that it's getting
Last night,
cut
the
off
second
before it
tornado in
entirely
8 days
finishes.
hit Ontario.
So if I increase the
The first
length
was in
of the
Windsor a week
effect,
ago yesterday.
it'll give it
Last
time
night, another one
to
whirled across the
fully
international boundary and struck Fort Francis.
fully
Jack
echo
McLaren of CKFI
with
interviews a man who dodged a rowboat and a building in the storm.
with the expense of
Last
some
night, the
computation.
second
But
tornado
that's
in
not
8
much of a
days hit
price.
Ontario.
Now,
First was in
this is
Windsor a week ago
obviously
yesterday.
too high for
Last night,
any
another
practical
one whirled
purpose.
across the international
So we'll take
boundary
it back
and
down.
struck Fort Francis. Jack McLaren of CKFI interviews a man who dodged
And
a
length
rowboat
can now
and a
afford to be
building in the
much
storm.
much shorter
Last
because
night, the second
it fades out
tornado in 8
entirely
days
after a
hit
very short
Ontario.
time.
The first was in
Dampening
Windsor a week ago
will
yesterday.
help make the effect
Last
a little
night,
bit
another one
more
whirled across the
realistic
international boundary and struck
by
Fort
cutting
Francis.
out the higher
Jack
frequencies
McLaren
faster than
of
the lower ones.
CKFI interviews
With
a
no
man who
dampening, you can
dodged a
see that they
rowboat and a building in
all the
storm.
frequencies cut out equally.
Last night, the second tornado in 8 days hit Ontario.
It's not as
First was
noticeable
in
when the
Windsor a
effect
week
is
ago yesterday.
understated.
Last night,
The
another one
2 other
whirled
important
across the international
parameters are the
boundary
wet and dry
struck
bars
Fort
here.
Francis.
This is
Jack
the volume of
McLaren
the effect.
CKFI interviews a man who dodged a rowboat and a building in the storm.
Obviously, you don't want it to be that loud,
Last night, the second tornado in 8 days hit Ontario.
but
The first was in Windsor a week ago yesterday.
you can simulate distance
Last night,
better
another one
by
whirled
having
across
more
the
and more
international
reverb
boundary and
in
struck Fort
respect to
Francis.
how much dry you have.
Jack McLaren of CKFI interviews a man who dodged a rowboat and a building in the storm.
Removing the dry will make it quieter and thus seem further away. Having more wet with regards to dry will make more of the reverb reach the listener than the actual sound itself, which is what happens when a sound source is further away from you. So now I'm going to remove this and
First was
copy
in
over
Windsor a
the
week ago yesterday.
effect
Last night, another
from
one whirled across the international boundary and struck
the
Fort
headlock
Francis.
track that I stored
Jack
earlier.
McLaren of CKFI interviews a man
That
who
was the
dodged
wrong
a
one.
rowboat and a building in the storm. Last night, the second tornado in 8 days hit Ontario. The first was in Windsor a week ago yesterday.
There we are.
Last night, another one whirled the international boundary and struck Fort Francis.
Good.
Jack McLaren of CKFI interviews a
Now
man
let's take a
who
look at the
dodged
video
a
again.
rowboat and a building in the storm. Last night, the second tornado in 8 days hit Ontario. The first was
So,
in Windsor a week ago yesterday. Last
after
night,
fooling
another one
around with
whirled
those
across the
effects
international
and
boundary
finding some
struck
values,
Fort Francis. Jack McLaren of
I've
CKFI
got
interviews
the
a man who
location of the
dodged a
source
rowboat and a building in the storm.
approximately, we'll say,
Last night, the second tornado
on
in
where
8 days hit Ontario. The first was in Windsor a
the
week ago yesterday.
man in the black shirt is
Last night,
standing.
another one whirled across the international boundary and struck Fort Francis. Jack
So if you
McLaren of
listen,
CKFI interviews a man who dodged
you
a
could
rowboat
almost
and a
believe
building
that the
in
sound
storm.
is approximately that far away.
Last night, the second tornado
The
in 8
reason it's not
days
as
hit
convincing as
Ontario.
it could be is
The
because we
first
don't
was in
have any of the
Windsor a
other
week ago
ambient
yesterday.
sounds mixed in.
Last night, another
If I
one
had
whirled
some
across
wind
the
noise
international
along
boundary
with some
and
sounds
struck
of
Fort
waves,
Francis.
then
Jack McLaren
it would
of
sound
CKFI
quite a bit more
interviews
credible.
A man who dodged a rowboat and a building in the storm. Last
Now,
night, the second
that's reverb and EQ. So let's pause this and talk a little bit about envelopes. They're very, very useful. I'm just going to load that back in. There's no reason I need to close it at the moment. The purpose of envelopes and automation is to change the value of the parameters that we were just controlling over time. So, if we were to take this, move it back to the beginning and extend it back out a bit, and change our playtime to something of the like, then if we were to go back and play, you'll notice
Last night, the second tornado in 8 days hit Ontario.
at the moment
First was in Windsor a week ago yesterday.
our sound is still
Last
coming
night,
from this
another
area,
one whirled across the international
but
boundary
the
and
man
struck
with the
Fort
black shirt
Francis.
has been walking
Jack
over
McLaren of
from here.
CKFI interviews a man who dodged a rowboat and a building in the
So
storm.
now it's coming from approximately the right direction, but before it was off. So if we wanted to follow him, then we could use an envelope. Let's stop this for a moment. To reveal envelopes, you can click on the trim button bar. I know that this is very, very overwhelming, but it's just a matter of finding the parameter that you want to change and clicking it. So in our case, let's start with not the Re-EQ plugin, not the Reverb plugin, but the spatializer. So it allows you to define multiple sources, but we only have one, so we're going to be looking for parameters of the first. And they're moving primarily left to right, so azimuth is going to be the value that we want to change. And we can see here that this purple line has appeared, a new track, and this is the envelope. This is its value over time. So we can see that it starts at 70.2. If we're not quite sure what that refers to, then we can revisit the effect and see, oh, 70 degrees. All right, so less would pull it to the left, which is where we want it. And as a note, because we have now put in an envelope, the value here is going to stay fixed at what the envelope tells it to, so we can't actually change this value anymore. But that's fine, you can just tell it what to do at this point. And I believe that around 10 seconds, the man in the black shirt reaches his destination, so we'll want him to reach this value at around 10 seconds. So by holding down Shift, we can click here and create a dot. And let's lower this value. You can see that he is walking here once I play this there. So he started from about here. So I want this lower. Try again. No, he started from around here. So that's too much. Let's try that. There's a bit of a delay in the start of the video, but that seems to track him fairly nicely. Another option, if you didn't want to try and set that manually, would be to right-click on Trim and set the mode to right. What that's going to do, as long as this is green, armed recording, is it will let you, as it plays, select precisely when you want the it'll allow you to control via this interface what you want the value to be at any given time. So just to give us a little bit of a time lag to let the video load before we start this, I'm going to move this over a bit and say that we'll play, and I want it to follow him.
Last night, the second tornado in 8 days hit Ontario. The first was in Windsor a week ago yesterday. Last night, another one whirled across the international boundary and struck Fort Francis. Jack McLaren of CKFI interviews a man who dodged a rowboat and a building in the storm.
that as I've done this, it has recorded the position of the plugin. So now, when we watch this video,
Last night, the second tornado in 8 days.
I made a mistake. We'll say it was on purpose for the benefit of your education. You'll always want to, after you get your values, to make sure you switch the mode from write back to read so that you don't unapply everything that you've already done. So let's just try that one more time.
Last night, the second tornado in 8 days hit Ontario. The first was in Windsor a week ago yesterday. Last night, another one whirled across the international boundary.
All right, something like that. Now we'll pause, or stop rather, and set this to trim/read. And now we can play and we can watch the video.
Last night, the second tornado in 8 days hit Ontario. The first was in Windsor a week ago yesterday. Last night, another one whirled across the international boundary and struck
So
Fort Frances.
the sound is now following him as he moves. We can do the same for the distance. If I were to stop this and go to trim and open the spatializer. So azimuth, you'll notice that elevation automatically became armed when I did azimuth. They must be tied together. If I click distance, then you'll see that I could do the exact same thing with how far away the sound source seems. So I could start it close and then move it further, and I'd want to use the same general shape of that trend with the wet and dry mix. So I could also have to stop right clicking there, close this out, go to reverb, find wet and dry, and then I can change their values so that it becomes more wet over time and less dry to simulate it moving further away. And with re-EQ, I can find the high shelf, the frequency of the high shelf band that we were working with. And I can lower that frequency band so that, and that would be the equivalent of doing this over time to make it seem like it was getting more and more distant. And all those together would create the convincing effect that the audio source was moving further and further away and was moving across our field of vision. And that is about it for the automation and envelopes and EQ and reverb. With those basics, you'll be able to simulate most sound sources being a certain direction and distance from the listener. Next up, I'll go into a bit more detail about specific challenges regarding some common sounds such as wind, birds, and water, and some shortcuts that you can take. Thank you, and I hope you've enjoyed the video.